When America's top law enforcement official becomes a victim of the very injustice he's sworn to fight, the tables turn in an unexpected confrontation that will change both sides forever. The busy terminal of Washington Dulles International Airport buzzes with activity as travelers rush to their gates. Among them is FBI Director Marcus Johnson, a distinguished African-American man in his late 50s, dressed in an impeccable Navy suit. He walks briskly through the concourse, checking his phone periodically as he heads toward the VIP security checkpoint. Johnson is running late for a classified briefing with international intelligence partners. His 2 security detail members have been called away unexpectedly to handle a separate incident, leaving the director to navigate the airport alone for the first time in years. As Johnson approaches the security area, Officer Peterson and Officer Daniels, 2 local police officers who are new transfers to the airport detail, notice him walking hurriedly and avoiding the main security line. Sir, you need to stop right there," Officer Peterson calls out, his hand instinctively moving to his holster. Johnson doesn't hear him over the airport announcements and continues walking. Officer Daniels rushes forward, grabbing Johnson's arm roughly. "Police, stop right now." Several travelers turn to stare as the confrontation unfolds. "Take your hands off me," Johnson says calmly but firmly. "I'm the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Officer Peterson scoffs. "Yeah, and I'm the president." Hands against the wall. Now. Without waiting for compliance, the officers force Johnson against the wall. Officer Daniels roughly handcuffs him while Peterson empties Johnson's pockets, tossing his credentials aside without examining them. "I'm telling you, I am FBI Director Marcus Johnson," he insists, maintaining his composure despite the humiliation. "My identification is in my breast pocket." "Sure you are," Officer Peterson sneers. "You people always have some excuse." Johnson's face remains stoic, but his eyes flash with recognition of what's happening. Several bystanders begin recording the incident on their phones, murmuring among themselves. "At least check my credentials before you continue this mistake," Johnson says evenly. Officer Daniels tightens the handcuffs unnecessarily. "We've got a hostile subject resisting arrest," he says into his radio, completely ignoring Johnson's request. They march Johnson through the terminal, drawing stares from shocked travelers. An airport employee who recognizes the director tries to intervene, but is ordered to step back. In a small airport security office, Johnson sits handcuffed to a chair, while officers Peterson and Daniels smugly fill out paperwork. The door bursts open as Captain Rivera, their supervisor, rushes in with a look of horror on her face. "What the hell have you 2 done?" she demands, immediately moving to unlock Johnson's handcuffs. "Do you have any idea who this is?" "Some guy trying to bypass security." Officer Peterson begins, but falters as he notices Rivera's expression. Captain Rivera helps Johnson to his feet. "Director Johnson, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am for this inexcusable incident." The color drains from both officers' faces as the reality of their situation sinks in. Peterson finally picks up Johnson's credentials from the desk and stares at them in disbelief. "Director, we didn't," Daniels stammers, unable to complete his sentence. The small airport security office falls into a deafening silence as Captain Rivera's words hang in the air. "Director Johnson, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am for this inexcusable incident." The fluorescent lights above buzz faintly, casting harsh shadows across the faces of everyone present. The room, designed for routine security matters, now hosts one of the most consequential moments in these officers' careers, and perhaps in the ongoing national conversation about policing and race. Director Marcus Johnson stands with perfect posture despite the ordeal he's just endured. His tailored suit shows signs of the rough handling, a sleeve slightly wrinkled where Officer Daniels had gripped him, the collar askew from being forced against the wall. Yet his dignity remains intact, an impenetrable armor forged through decades of navigating spaces where he was often the only black man in the room. His eyes, sharp and observant, move methodically between the three officers before him. Captain Rivera, a veteran officer with 22 years of service, appears physically ill with the realization of what has transpired under her command. Her olive complexion has paled considerably, and tiny beads of sweat have formed along her hairline. As the highest-ranking officer present, she understands better than anyone the gravity of the situation, not just for the department's public relations, but for the integrity of the institution she has dedicated her life to upholding. These officers will be immediately suspended pending a full investigation. Rivera continues, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. I take full responsibility for their actions and for the failure in our training protocols that allowed this to happen. She stands at perfect attention, shoulders squared, chin lifted, the posture of someone prepared to face consequences. The two officers, Peterson and Daniels, stand frozen in place. Peterson, the older of the two at 38, has been with the airport police for just over 8 months, a transfer from a small suburban precinct. His personnel file shows a decent record, no major complaints, but nothing exceptional either. Daniels is younger, barely 26, with less than 2 years on the force total. Both men stare at Director Johnson with dawning horror. Their previous smugness evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. Officer Peterson is the first to move. His hand trembles slightly as he finally picks up Johnson's credentials from the desk where they had been carelessly tossed. The gold FBI shield catches the light as he stares at the identification card, at the name and title clearly printed below the official Department of Justice seal. His eyes move from the credentials to Johnson's face, matching the photograph to the man standing before him. The reality of his situation crashes down upon him like a physical weight. Director, we didn't. Daniels attempts to speak, but his words disintegrate into incoherent sounds. His Adam's apple bobs as he swallows hard, his youthful face now ashen. The realization that he has potentially destroyed his career in a single prejudice-driven moment has rendered him nearly catatonic. Outside the office, the muffled sounds of the airport continue unabated. Announcements over the PA system, the distant rumble of luggage carts, the perpetual hum of thousands of travelers moving through their daily journeys. Inside, time seems suspended as the implications of what has occurred settle over everyone present. Officer Peterson, his movements stiff and mechanical, takes 2 steps forward. Then, in a gesture as surprising as it is dramatic, he drops to one knee before Director Johnson. His face, previously marked by unwarranted authority and disdain, now crumbles into an expression of utter shame. Sir, Peterson begins, his voice barely above a whisper. I beg your forgiveness. He clears his throat, forcing himself to continue. I made assumptions that were completely unwarranted. I saw a black man moving quickly through the terminal, and He pauses, struggling to articulate the uncomfortable truth. I profiled you. There's no excuse for my behavior. His admission hangs in the air, raw and undeniable. For perhaps the first time in his career, Officer Peterson is confronting the biases that have silently informed his policing. The recognition spreads across his features like a stain, the understanding that this moment isn't an isolated incident, but the inevitable outcome of subtle prejudices he has allowed to go unchallenged within himself. Officer Daniels, following his partner's lead but motivated equally by genuine remorse and self-preservation, also kneels. His younger, less weathered face shows the shock of someone encountering consequences for the first time. Director Johnson, he says, his voice cracking slightly, I failed in my duty as an officer. I didn't follow proper procedure. I let my... He hesitates, struggling with the admission. I let my prejudices affect my judgment. I saw what I expected to see, not what was actually before me. Captain Rivera watches this display with a complex mixture of emotions crossing her face. Embarrassment at the theatrical nature of the gesture, recognition of its sincerity, and professional concern about what happens next. A bead of sweat traces a path down her temple as she awaits Johnson's response. The airport security office, no larger than a typical classroom, feels increasingly claustrophobic as the tension builds. The metal desk, the utilitarian chairs, the outdated computer equipment, and the institutional beige walls all seem to press in on the four individuals caught in this pivotal moment. On a cork bulletin board behind them, routine notices and security alerts hang as silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Director Johnson regards the kneeling officers with an expression that reveals nothing of his internal thoughts. He has navigated similar situations throughout his 30-year career in law enforcement, though never one where he himself was the victim. As the first black director of the FBI in the organization's history, he has been acutely aware of the symbolic weight of his position, of the scrutiny that follows his every decision, and of the delicate balance required when addressing issues of race within the justice system. "Stand up," Johnson finally says, his deep voice resonating with natural authority. "Both of you. That's not necessary." There is no anger in his tone, but rather the measured calm of someone who has long ago learned that displays of emotion would be used against him. "I'm not interested in gestures. I'm interested in understanding." The officers rise awkwardly, their faces flushed with a combination of shame and relief. They stand at attention, awaiting judgment, their careers and reputations hanging by the thinnest of threads. Director Johnson straightens his suit jacket with a practiced motion, brushing away invisible dust from the sleeve. This small act of personal dignity speaks volumes, a man reclaiming his appearance after having his personhood temporarily stripped away. "I want to understand exactly what happened here today," Johnson continues, his gaze steady and penetrating. "Not just the actions, but the thinking behind them. Officer Peterson, when you first noticed me, what specifically prompted your suspicion?" Peterson shifts uncomfortably, caught between the professional instinct to justify his actions and the dawning realization that any explanation will reveal biases he's not proud to acknowledge. "You were moving quickly, sir, bypassing the main security line. It seemed suspicious." "I see," Johnson responds, his tone neutral. "And have you stopped other individuals, white individuals, for moving quickly through the terminal before?" The question lands like a precision strike. Peterson's mouth opens slightly, then closes. The answer is evident in his silence. "Officer Daniels," Johnson continues, turning his attention to the younger officer, "when I informed you that I was the FBI director, why didn't you simply check my credentials before escalating the situation?" Daniels swallows hard. He glances at Peterson, then back to Johnson. "I didn't believe you, sir." "And why was that?" The young officer's discomfort is palpable. "I guess I didn't expect the FBI director to be." His voice trails off. "To be black." Johnson finishes for him, his voice level but pointed. Daniels nods almost imperceptibly, his eyes fixed on the floor. Captain Rivera interjects, her professional training kicking in. "Director Johnson, I assure you that racial profiling is explicitly prohibited in our department policies. These officers have undergone diversity training, and their actions today represent a serious breach of protocol." Johnson turns his attention to Rivera. "Captain, with all due respect, policies and training mean very little if they don't translate to actual behavior. What happened today isn't about policy failures. It's about the persistent gap between what we claim to believe and how we actually behave under pressure." The silence that follows is heavy with recognition. Each person in the room is confronting uncomfortable truths about themselves, about the system they serve, about the distance between American ideals and American reality. Director Johnson takes a measured breath. He has been in law enforcement long enough to know that this moment, painful as it is, presents an opportunity, not just for these individual officers, but potentially for institutional change. "What I experienced today," he begins, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a seasoned public speaker, "is what countless citizens experience every day across this country. The difference is, I have a title that forces you to reconsider your assumptions. I have credentials that, once examined, command your respect. Most people who face what I face today have no such protection. The weight of his words settles over the room. Peterson and Daniel stand motionless, absorbing the full impact of Johnson's statement. Captain Rivera nods slightly, her expression somber with recognition. The question now, Johnson continues, is what happens next. What lessons do we take from this moment? Do we treat it as an isolated incident, a simple mistake to be buried in administrative reviews and formal apologies? Or do we recognize it as a symptom of deeper issues that require genuine commitment to address? Outside the office, the airport continues its rhythmic flow of departures and arrivals. Inside, 4 individuals stand at a different kind of crossroads, one that will determine not just their professional futures, but their understanding of justice, responsibility, and the ongoing work of building a more perfect union. The fluorescent lights of the security office seem to dim as Director Johnson's powerful presence fills the room. He stands before the 3 officers, not as a victim seeking retribution, but as a leader seizing an educational moment. His expression remains composed, revealing nothing of the internal calculations surely taking place behind his measured gaze. For Johnson, this incident has transcended the personal. It has become an opportunity to effect change from within a system he has dedicated his life to improving. What happened here today is precisely why I've been pushing for police reform at the federal level, Johnson says, his voice calm but resonant with authority. His words aren't heated with anger, which somehow makes them more impactful. The controlled precision of his speech reflects decades of navigating spaces where showing too much emotion would undermine his message. This isn't about me or my position. This is about how law enforcement treats citizens. Today, I wasn't treated as the FBI director. I was profiled and mistreated based on how I look. The truth of his statement settles heavily on everyone present. Captain Rivera's shoulders stiffen slightly as she absorbs the indictment of the system she represents. Though she wasn't personally involved in the incident, she understands her responsibility as a commanding officer. The failure occurred on her watch, under her leadership, reflecting training deficiencies she should have addressed. Director, what would you like us to do? Rivera asks, her voice steady despite the career-threatening situation before her. Her question hangs in the air, direct, professional, and laced with the unspoken understanding that Johnson holds considerable power in this moment. She stands at attention, prepared to accept whatever consequences he deems appropriate. Outside the office window, travelers continue their journeys, oblivious to the transformative confrontation unfolding just steps away from their hurried paths. A child's laughter filters through the glass, a stark contrast to the gravity pervading the small room. Sunlight streams through the blinds, casting linear shadows across the institutional carpeting, creating bars of light and dark that seem oddly symbolic of the justice system itself. Johnson takes a moment to straighten his tie, a small but deliberate gesture that reclaims his dignity. His fingers move with practiced precision, adjusting the Windsor knot with the muscle memory of someone who has prepared for important meetings thousands of times before. This mundane action serves as a brief interlude, allowing everyone present to gather their thoughts before he delivers his verdict. First, Johnson begins, holding up one finger. I want body camera footage from both officers preserved. Not deleted, not accidentally corrupted, not lost in administrative processing. Preserved. His tone makes it clear this is non-negotiable. This footage will be valuable for training purposes. Captain Rivera nods, making a mental note to personally secure the footage as soon as this meeting concludes. She understands the implication. Too often, evidence of police misconduct mysteriously disappears before it can be properly reviewed. Johnson is ensuring this won't happen here. Second, he continues, raising another finger. I want them both reassigned to community outreach after a suspension and proper training. At this, both officers look up in surprise. They had clearly expected termination at minimum, possibly criminal charges for false arrest and civil rights violations. Firing them solves nothing. Education does. The pragmatism of Johnson's approach catches everyone off guard. In an era where public figures often demand heads on platters after such incidents, his measured response feels almost radical. There's a deeper strategy at work. Johnson recognizes that dismissing these officers would simply move the problem elsewhere rather than addressing the underlying issues. Officer Peterson, the older and more experienced of the two, struggles to maintain his professional composure. His eyes reveal a complex mixture of relief, shame, and confusion. He had prepared himself for career destruction, for becoming another statistic in the ongoing national conversation about police misconduct. Instead, he faces the more difficult path of confronting his biases while continuing to serve. Officer Daniels appears similarly stunned. His youth is suddenly apparent as emotions play openly across his features. The opportunity being extended, a chance to learn from his catastrophic error rather than be defined by it, seems to overwhelm him. He blinks rapidly, fighting back tears that would only add to his humiliation. The small security office, with its utilitarian furniture and generic institutional decor, has become an unlikely crucible for transformation. The air conditioning hums softly in the background, cycling cool air through a room that feels charged with potential energy. On the wall, a framed code of conduct for airport security personnel seems to mock the proceedings with its lofty language about professionalism and equal treatment. And third, Johnson says, his voice drawing everyone's attention back to the moment at hand, "I'll be late for my meeting, but I want the three of you to join me at FBI headquarters next week. You'll participate in our bias training program, and then we'll discuss how to implement similar training here." This final directive completes Johnson's approach: accountability, education, and systemic change. He's not just addressing the symptom, he's targeting the disease. By bringing these officers into the FBI's training program, he's creating ambassadors who will carry those lessons back to their department, potentially influencing dozens of other officers indirectly. Captain Rivera's expression shifts subtly as she recognizes the opportunity being presented. This could have been a career-ending disaster. Instead, it might become a departmental turning point. "We'll be there, Director. You have my word," she responds, her voice carrying the weight of genuine commitment rather than mere professional obligation. Johnson retrieves his credentials from the desk, slipping them back into his inner suit pocket. The simple action carries symbolic weight, a reclamation of identity after having it stripped away. He gathers his briefcase, preparing to finally continue to his delayed meeting. At the door, he pauses and turns back to face the three officers. The moment feels pivotal, like a scene in a courtroom drama where the judge delivers a final statement before the gavel falls. Johnson's presence commands the room one last time. "What happened today was wrong," he says, each word carefully measured. "But what matters now is what we learn from it. I've seen enough good officers to know change is possible." A subtle emphasis on good acknowledges that he doesn't view all police with the same broad brush. "I've also experienced enough discrimination to know change is necessary." The personal admission that even as FBI director, Johnson has faced discrimination throughout his career lands with particular impact. It transforms him from an abstract authority figure to a human being with lived experiences that inform his perspective. The officers see him suddenly in three dimensions, not as the caricature they initially perceived. Johnson doesn't wait for responses. He opens the door, stepping back into the bustling airport terminal where announcements echo overhead and travelers rush past, pulling rolling suitcases that click rhythmically against the tile flooring. As the door closes behind him, the three officers remain momentarily frozen, processing what has just occurred. Officer Peterson is the first to break the silence. "I've never," he begins, then stops, struggling to articulate the complexity of his feelings. "That man could have ended our careers with a single phone call." Captain Rivera nods slowly. "He still could. Don't mistake mercy for weakness." Officer Daniels sinks into a nearby chair, the adrenaline that had sustained him through the confrontation finally ebbing away. "Why would he help us after what we did?" he asks, genuine confusion in his voice. The question reflects his youth and inexperience, but also touches on a fundamental curiosity about human nature, why some people choose growth over vengeance. Rivera considers the question carefully before responding. As a woman of color who has risen through the ranks of a predominantly male institution, she understands something about navigating systems while attempting to change them from within. Because Director Johnson is thinking beyond punishment, she finally says, he's thinking about impact, about legacy. She moves to the window, watching as the distinguished figure of the FBI director disappears into the crowd of travelers. What happened today wasn't just about 3 careers or 1 wrongful detention. It was about all the people who will be affected by how we police going forward. The implications of her statement settle over the small office. The incident, humiliating and potentially career-ending as it was, has created an opening. A chance for genuine reflection and change. Whether that potential will be realized depends entirely on what happens next. Outside, the airport continues its eternal cycle of arrivals and departures. Planes land and take off, carrying thousands of people from one destination to another. Within this mundane pattern of human movement, something extraordinary has occurred, a confrontation that transformed into an opportunity, an arrest that became a lesson, a mistake that might yet lead to meaningful change. In the security office, 3 police officers begin the difficult work of confronting their assumptions, examining their training, and considering what justice truly means in a society still struggling to live up to its highest ideals. The real aftermath, they now understand, has only just begun. 3 days after the incident at Dulles International Airport, the Department of Justice press briefing room buzzes with anticipation. Journalists from every major news outlet fill the rows of seats, equipment cases scattered at their feet, cameras positioned strategically around the room. The incident has leaked to the press, first as whispers, then as unverified reports, and finally as grainy cell phone footage captured by a traveler that went viral overnight. The nation has spent 48 hours in heated debate over yet another high-profile incident involving law enforcement and race. The blue backdrop bearing the Department of Justice seal stands ready for the impending media event. Soft, professional lighting bathes the podium in a warm glow designed to flatter on camera. Behind the scenes, press secretaries and communications directors make final preparations, reviewing talking points and anticipating the barrage of questions that will follow the official statements. The tension in the room is palpable. Journalists checking recording equipment, adjusting settings on cameras, whispering theories to one another about what will transpire. At precisely 2:00 p.m., the side door opens. FBI Director Marcus Johnson enters first, his commanding presence immediately drawing all eyes. He wears a different suit than the one from the airport incident. This one a deep charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, projecting authority and professionalism. His expression is controlled but not severe, revealing nothing of the personal turmoil he must have experienced in the aftermath of his public humiliation. Following Johnson is a surprise to the assembled press corps. Captain Lucia Rivera of the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority Police, and behind her, Officers Eric Peterson and Jason Daniels, both in full-dress uniforms. The officers' faces convey a complex mixture of emotions: nervousness at facing the national media, lingering shame from their actions, and determination to endure what comes next. Captain Rivera maintains a professional demeanor, though the strain of the past 3 days shows in the slight shadows beneath her eyes. A murmur ripples through the crowd of journalists as they recognize the significance of this united front. The officer's presence alongside Johnson shatters the expected narrative of punishment and division. Cameras click rapidly, capturing what will undoubtedly be tomorrow's front-page image across the country. The communications director steps to the microphone first, delivering a brief introduction before yielding the podium to Director Johnson. As Johnson takes his position, adjusting the microphone slightly, the room falls into expectant silence. The nation waits to hear how one of its highest-ranking law enforcement officials will address his own mistreatment at the hands of those sworn to uphold the law. "Good afternoon," Johnson begins, his deep voice resonating with natural authority. What happened at Dulles International was unfortunate but educational. He pauses, allowing the carefully chosen words to register. Not tragic, not outrageous, but educational, setting a tone that surprises many of the journalists who had anticipated righteous anger. These officers made a serious mistake based on unconscious bias. Johnson continues, gesturing subtly toward Peterson and Daniels, who stand at parade rest behind him. But rather than simply punish them, we're using this as an opportunity to improve law enforcement across the board. The statement elicits raised eyebrows among the press corps. In an era where public figures often call for swift and severe consequences for racial profiling, Johnson's measured approach defies expectations. Several journalists begin scribbling notes furiously, already reformulating the stories they had presumed they would write. Over the past 72 hours, I've had extensive conversations with these officers, with Captain Rivera, and with leadership at both the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. Johnson explains, his cadence measured and deliberate. The lights from the television cameras cast his face in a warm glow, highlighting the gravitas he brings to the podium. What emerged from those discussions wasn't a desire for retribution, but a recognition that we have an opportunity to address systemic issues in a meaningful way. Johnson turns slightly, acknowledging the officers standing behind him. They've agreed to participate in developing new training protocols that will be implemented nationwide. Sometimes, the best teachers are those who have made mistakes and learned from them. The press room remains unusually quiet, captivated by the unexpected narrative unfolding before them. Instead of the anticipated story of punishment and division, they're witnessing something far more nuanced, a story about accountability that doesn't end with career destruction, but begins with genuine transformation. Officer Peterson steps forward, his movements stiff with nervousness. He clears his throat before leaning slightly toward the microphone. The camera flashes intensify, capturing this unprecedented moment. An officer publicly addressing his own racial profiling incident alongside the very person he wrongfully detained. I want to publicly apologize to Director Johnson and to everyone who has experienced similar treatment. Peterson begins, his voice initially unsteady but gaining strength as he continues. I failed as an officer that day, but I'm committed to being part of the solution going forward. His words hang in the air, simple but powerful in their acknowledgement of wrongdoing without qualification or excuse. In an age where public apologies often come wrapped in layers of justification, the straightforwardness of Peterson's statement stands out starkly. The press room erupts with shouted questions, dozens of journalists raising their hands and calling out simultaneously. The cacophony of voices creates an indecipherable wall of sound as reporters compete to have their specific questions acknowledged. Did you consider filing charges against the officers? Will there be a lawsuit against the department? Officer Peterson, did you recognize Director Johnson at all during the incident? Director Johnson, is this response influenced by political pressure? Johnson raises his hand, palm outward in a gesture requesting silence. The room gradually quiets, the journalists reluctantly holding their questions as they recognize the director isn't finished with his prepared remarks. Today isn't about assigning blame, Johnson continues, his voice carrying easily through the now silent room. It's about acknowledging a systemic problem and taking concrete steps to address it. No one, regardless of their position or appearance, should experience what I did. And while my title may have brought attention to this incident, countless others face similar treatment daily without cameras or consequences. The weight of his words settles over the room. Johnson has shifted the narrative from his personal experience to the broader social context, from an isolated incident involving a high-ranking official to a window into experiences shared by many Americans. Beginning next month, the FBI will partner with the Department of Homeland Security to implement a new training program for all federal law enforcement officers, with particular emphasis on airport security personnel, Johnson announces. This program will be developed with input from community leaders, civil rights experts, and he gestures toward the officers behind him, law enforcement officers who understand firsthand the consequences of unchecked bias. Captain Rivera steps forward to join Johnson at the podium, her posture perfectly professional despite the obvious pressure of the moment. The Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority Police Department is fully committed to this initiative, she states firmly. What happened to Director Johnson represents a failure in our training and protocols, and we take full responsibility for addressing those shortcomings. The press conference continues for another 20 minutes with Johnson, Rivera, and eventually both officers fielding questions from the journalists. Throughout, Johnson maintains his measured tone, neither minimizing the seriousness of what occurred nor allowing it to be sensationalized. He repeatedly steers the conversation toward constructive solutions rather than punitive measures, frustrating some journalists who had hoped for more dramatic pronouncements. As the event concludes, the participants prepare to leave the stage. The final image captured by the press photographers shows Johnson shaking hands with both officers, a powerful visual that will appear on front pages across the country the following morning. The image captures a moment of reconciliation that transcends the typical narratives surrounding law enforcement and race in America, suggesting the possibility of progress through accountability rather than division. The press briefing room gradually empties as journalists rush to file their stories, debating among themselves how to frame what they've just witnessed. Was this a masterclass in crisis management or a genuine moment of transformation? A political calculation or a principled stand? The story will be interpreted through countless lenses in the hours and days to come, but the image of that handshake will remain, defying simple categorization. In the hallway outside the press room, away from the cameras and microphones, Officer Daniels approaches Director Johnson. The young officer's face reveals the internal struggle he's experiencing, relief at keeping his job mixed with genuine remorse and lingering uncertainty about his future. "Why are you doing this for us?" Daniels asks quietly, his voice barely audible in the bustling corridor. "You could have ended our careers." The question isn't merely about professional consequences, but about fundamental concepts of justice and mercy, concepts that Daniels is suddenly being forced to reconsider in light of recent events. Johnson pauses, turning to face the young officer directly. The hallway lighting is less flattering than the professional setup of the press room, revealing the fatigue lines around Johnson's eyes, evidence of the emotional toll the past few days have taken, despite his composed public persona. "Because justice isn't about punishment," Johnson responds, his voice lowered but intense with conviction. "It's about improvement. And sometimes, the people who need to change the most are the ones who deserve a second chance to get it right." With that, Johnson continues down the hallway, flanked by his staff, who have been waiting respectfully at a distance. He has meetings to attend, policies to implement, and a department to run. The incident at Dulles Airport will not define his career, but his response to it might well influence the future of policing in America. Behind him, Officers Peterson and Daniels stand alongside Captain Rivera, watching the FBI director's departure. They remain in place for a moment, each lost in private thoughts about what has transpired and what lies ahead. The path forward will not be easy. They will face skepticism from colleagues, scrutiny from the public, and the difficult internal work of confronting their own biases. But in this moment, something rare has occurred within the often rigid structures of law enforcement, an opportunity for genuine transformation born from acknowledged failure. As they finally turn to leave, Captain Rivera places a hand briefly on each officer's shoulder. "This is just the beginning," she tells them quietly. "Make it count." Her words encapsulate the challenge that lies before them. To ensure that what happened at Dulles Airport becomes not merely an embarrassing footnote in their careers, but the catalyst for meaningful change.